and welcome to Freedom Fighters Code Gray. This is a show where we discuss human trafficking, a prevalent issue in Canada. How are precarious migrant workers experiencing trafficking in our community? We're going to be discussing that topic in today's episode. Please note that some of the conversation in this episode may be triggering for viewers, as we will be dealing with content related to trauma, violence, and exploitation. If you need information and support related to human trafficking, please call the Human Trafficking Hotline number at 1-833-900-1010. Today, I am thrilled to have with me the Executive Director and co-founder of the FCJ Refugee Centre, Loly Rico. Welcome, Loly. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for the invitation, Michaela.
I would love to just start our conversation off with, can you share a bit about your journey in advocacy work over the years in support of folks who are from a precarious migrant population, but also you're the co-founder of the FCJ Refugee Centre. How did that all begin?
Well, the FCJ Refugee Centre, we are 32 years of existence, and it started because my partner and my kids, we came as refugees from El Salvador. And I always said we are the first refugees at the FCJ Refugee Centre, because there was the Faithful Companions of Jesus, which is a religious congregation. They opened their door for refugees at that time. That was all the civil wars in Central America. When we came as refugees, and we see that there is a different class of refugees, the ones brought by the government resettlement, but the ones that they show up at the border, they have in a very precarious situation and vulnerable and no access to services. And that's how we start opening the doors, welcoming women and children that they were fleeing persecution based on their gender. And that's how we start with 2 bedrooms, and now we run 4 houses, and we have different programs that they have been trying to cover of the need, not just for refugees, but with precarious migrants. And if you see in our motto said that we walk with uprooted people, that means we welcome anyone who has a need to how they can regularize or to stay in Canada.
It's so inspiring and humbling to hear how, from your situation and experience in Canada, you saw a need in the community to be able to support families who were coming to Canada, fleeing injustices of varying kind. And now you said you have 4 shelters, homes that are up and running to welcome, and in your words, uprooted people. Can you share a bit about your journey in this work over the years? What were some of you said 32 years that the center has been running. What were some of the key milestones or memories that you have from doing this work over the years?
Well, I can mention, there is many, but I can mention 3. And one is we were working, and we start, because we were focusing on women, we start seeing that there were women. I remember in the 90s, women fleeing when the Soviet Union fell down, young women coming in Canada and looking for protection. And one milestone that make us really to look that is not just to help them to go through the refugee process was there were women coming, a young woman coming from the area of Chechnya, that she was fleeing persecution, but in her journey she was talking about how she was sexually assaulted, how she was sold, and I mentioned that because that make us to start seeing, well, there is trafficking situation with the governments. They was not on the media, but we were seeing them coming in the 90s. Wow. And I mentioned that case because when we were bringing the case to the refugee board, immigration refugee board, was that she was speaking up about her situation, but they were not seeing the grounds or the elements of protection until she mentioned to the board member, who was a male, that she said, well, I was sold by one group to another group, and then they put me in a container, and I show up at the New York. That's when he mentioned, you were a trafficking person, but he mentioned the old traditional word that was the trafficking of white women. That is a very historical and tradition that they were using when they were moving the colonizers, women to the Americas. And that's, I mentioned as a milestone because we start saying we don't just see refugee cases. We start seeing cases from everywhere. Wow. The other milestone that I can mention, and is related to what we are talking, is that we start seeing cases, people that they were coming, and they were coming without status. We have people without status that they are looking for a better life, and the immigration program has a lot of loopholes that people can fall on the cracks. But the person came and they were coming and said, well, I've been working, doing cleaning in a hotel, and they haven't paid me. And we start trying to negotiate with the hotel, and the hotel didn't know that they were hiring that person. And that's how we start looking at trafficking is not only sexual exploitation, as the case we saw, it's also in the labor trafficking. And there were no awareness. There were no situations that we can call the police. There were no possibilities that they will be where to bring their case, because also there were no refugee cases. And that's how we start looking how we can start moving and advocate for people who are in the labor exploitation, where it could be a migrant worker as coming to Canada as a temporary foreign worker, or it could be someone who offered them a job, and when they came here, they start being exploited and didn't have a status or a work permit. And that's how we start moving and to start doing awareness, especially when you go and pick up apples. I know that in Simcoe area is a place where there is a lot of migrant workers coming and the farm and pick up apples, that they are coming here. And the most injustice that is with them is that even though they come from February and leave in December, some of them, they come with 2 years work permit, they don't have the possibility to stay in Canada. Also, an eye-open for me as a milestone to start doing advocacy is that these people, they were coming with a work permit that is closed. That means you choose to do this interview. I choose to work at the FCJ. Well, even though I funded, but I can move to another place. But they cannot move from work because they come with a closed work permit, and they come that they need to work with that company. And the thing is that we learn that sometimes working in the farms, the farmers, they have, and it's very sad, a blacklist, that if you're a troublemaker, they won't bring you back the next year. And these people I met, and that opened my eyes when I met a man from Mexico that he had been coming for 40 years. He started coming to Canada to work in the farm when he was 16.
Oh my goodness.
And I met him, and he was in his 50s, ready to retire. And I said, well, you are collecting your money and you will retire in Mexico. And he said, no, I've been supporting all my family. If I retire, I go back to Mexico, I won't have a retirement. I need to start working there. And who is going to hire me if I am in my 60s? That's when I start saying, well, we need to do something. And that's how we start looking to how to start doing advocacy to say anyone who comes to Canada, they have the right to choose where they want to work and to choose how they can be if they want to live here. Not everybody wants to live, especially in the cold, even though Canada is beautiful, but sometimes you miss what is your tradition, your culture, your climate, your family. But some, they want to have another life that they choose and they want to stay here. give them a choice, that the victim of human trafficking, they take away the choice.
There is so much, Loly, that you have shared and that you have learned, and I'm grateful to be listening and hearing from your learnings over these years, over these 32 years of how your eyes have been open to different situations of trafficking through talking to individual people. Right? And those individual stories have shaped the work that you do. And you've highlighted some of the different areas that we're seeing exploitation happen, whether that's in the sex industry, but then you're highlighting labor trafficking where it's happening in farming communities, where folks may be, for example, getting apples, right? That some of the folks who are working in those spaces may actually be exploited, or you mentioned hotels, right? So there's all these different areas where labor trafficking can be happening in our society and our community, and it's so important to address it. So I thank you for bringing just all of that knowledge forward. And so you mentioned that those kinds of stories brought you into a place of, we need to advocate. You use the word advocate against labor trafficking. What are some of the advocacy efforts that you have been involved in that specifically relate to this topic?
Well, one of the things the first advocacy that we were involved as an organization was to say that in Canada is labor trafficking. And if you see in the first U.S. reports, they were talking all that Canada talking about sex trafficking, and the U.S. report was saying, but Canada is not looking on the labor trafficking. If you read in the last 3 reports, you can see that Canada is start looking on the labor trafficking. I'm not saying that we are in the right place. We are not. We still needs to recognize that there is a labor trafficking in Canada, and not just publicly. I mentioned in the farms, in hotels, in service, like in the restaurants, in construction that is booming. I was coming here from Toronto to Barrie, and how it's growing Barrie, how you could see all the construction. And we are in the need of labor, no? And to do that awareness, not just publicly, but also to the law enforcement. And because when we were bringing forward cases, they were saying, well, doesn't meet the criminal code. And we have been, as an organization, making an influence on the changes in the criminal code that just not be identified of sex trafficking. Now we see in Ontario cases that we have been helping the people that they have been putting towards to the criminal code, and cases that they have been now penalized. That we are in 2023, and I start seeing it even at the time of the pandemic. And I've been working on human trafficking since 2002. Or even before, that I didn't know, I was not aware. And it's a long way to go, because still we are now convincing law enforcement there is a labor, but now we need to convince immigration that there is labor trafficking in a way that there is a lot of cases that we bring forward, and that they should have access to a temporary residence where they can have a place where they can reflect and give them the opportunity to continue working, but also to have a life here in Canada.
Well, Loly, thank you so much for just the tireless efforts that you and your team have made over the years to be able to bring labor trafficking to the forefront in some of these places, and to continue to advocate in areas where it's needed to be discussed, but also to be able to be a part of ensuring that prosecutions are happening and that justice and equity is being sought for precarious migrant populations. We are going to continue this conversation with the Executive Director, Loly Rico, of the FCJ Refugee Centre after we take this short break. Welcome back to Freedom Fighters Co-Gray. This is a show where we discuss human trafficking, an issue that is prevalent in Simcoe County, Ontario, and across Canada. Today I am joined by the founder of the FCJ Refugee Centre, Loly Rico, who is discussing how human trafficking is impacting precarious migrant populations. Now, Loly, I understand that there was a labor trafficking case that happened in Simcoe County a few years ago, and the FCJ Refugee Centre was involved in supporting individuals who had been experienced by trafficking. Can you share a little bit about what was this trafficking situation? Where were people being exploited? And how did your center come alongside those folks?
Well, what we get involved was because a person came to our office living in Barrie, and it's showing that they were living in Barrie in very bad conditions. Not talking about the bad work, was the living conditions. And when we start seeing, we were trying to look to the person how to move them to Toronto. Then they start talking about where they were working, how was the situation, and they were working in different resorts in the area, not just Simcoe, also was outside Simcoe. And at one point, we were contacted by an officer in OPP to go because there was a situation with a group of people in the Wasaga area where they speak Spanish, and they were looking if we can support in a way that to know what's going on with them because they didn't speak Spanish. We went and we did the interview, and was very sad because Simcoe is the area where I come to spend my summers, and you always believe that in this, especially Georgian Bay, you can go and rest. And was sad because we found people in a cottage, small cottage in winter time, with no food, no payment, with in the middle of nowhere, and we start supporting them more specifically what is their needs. We didn't support them on, especially there was a pregnant woman, there were some couples, like in a cottage that you can be 4 people, there were 8 people. And I was really sad. That's how then they did, we just were helping this group. Then we learned in the news that they did a big raid and was a big group. How we were supporting them was that most of them, they didn't have a status, or some of them, they were having a very low, like a almost expired work permit, or some of them, they were migrant workers. And what we support was to start regularizing them with a temporary resident permit. And that's one of the challenges, because this case is still, we cannot talk that much because it's still in court. But that's, if you remember, it was 2017, 18, and we're still 2023 in court. I know that the justice system was impacted with the pandemic, but this is all these many years, people waiting to do justice because they still going to court, and that's something that is a long time. And they haven't defined their situation. There is a long time that they haven't found the situation to stay in Canada. They are still with temporary resident permits, and many of them, they start their life here, and they prefer to stay here.
What do you think that can be done, whether it's through individuals, systems in society, to advance justice and equity for precarious migrant populations who may have experienced trafficking?
One of the things that we are looking right now, we are involved in 2 campaigns as an organization with other organizations. And as a principle, we don't do everything. We work in collaboration, not just with, if law enforcement need us, we go and to support the client. because that's our focus, is client-centered. But also, we believe that if we work together as a community and as a society, we can start really making awareness about that there is trafficking situation in Canada. And not just sex trafficking, because sex trafficking is very visual. But labor trafficking, you never know. You go to a restaurant, you don't know who is serving you. You don't know who is cooking for you. And it's not to point them, because it's not their fault. They have been coming with false ideas that someone was selling to them. We are seeing clients that they say, well, you just apply for your visa and you can work with a visa, and when they realize they need a work permit. What we are doing, one of the campaigns, is that there is a lot of people without status, people that they came with false hopes that someone was selling them, that they can come and work in Canada, and they stay here without a valid status work permit, and they still continue working. They need to support their families, because many of the cases that we have been seeing, they have sold everything because someone was bringing the Canadian dream, and it's very sad. And what we are asking is to the old government of Canada to have a regularization program. That means that someone come in circumstances that they were offered like an option of work and doesn't happen and being exploited. Why not? They can have accessibility to regularize. Or a person that is come with a work permit and working in a farm, but because they cannot move to another farm, and they are not well informed, they left the work condition because it's so bad that they break the immigration rules, and they stay without status, and thus they need to be regularized because they are providing, they are serving in this country, they are helping to keep our economy high. That's why we are looking, and that's why we are asking people, anyone who wants to stay in Canada can be staying and be regularized, because this is our future citizens. And also the other is that when you come with a work permit, and because it's a closed work permit, give you the opportunity, if you can prove that that's happening right now, if you can prove that you are in exploitation, you can have access to what they call open work permit. But that work permit is only valid for 1 year. Then you need to look someone else that can hire you, but then goes to a closed work permit. And in that case, what we are asking is, if you are exploited and you have a work permit, give you an open work permit in general, and not with a limited time, that they can work wherever they want, but also give them the opportunity that they can apply for a permanent residence if they want to stay in Canada. That's what we are doing right now, and I'm looking at especially the Simcoe area, where you have a lot of temporary foreign workers, that you can talk to your MPs and say, it's important. They are giving you a lot of value. Even in the farms, they live with you guys, with the people. You go and pick up apples, or we go and buy the corns in the summer. Well, they have the right, like us, that they can stay in Canada, and if they want to stay. Not everybody wants to stay, but if they want to stay, to give them the opportunity that they can apply, and they can stay in Canada with a permanent residence and become future citizens.
Those initiatives that you're working towards are so important and so crucial in advancing equity for this population group. And I wonder if someone's listening to our conversation and they go, well, I would like to talk to my MP about this, or I want to support what the FCJ Refugee Centre is doing. How can folks get involved? How can they partner with you in this important work that you're doing to advocate for migrant worker rights?
There is 2 ways to do it. one is if you want to go and talk to your MP, there is the Canadian Council for Refugees. It's an organization that we are members. They have the whole campaign about the open work permit, as well with the regularization programs. And but also they can contact in our website. We have that, and they can have the link and go and talk to their MP. The other way is to help us at the organization. If you say, well, I cannot talk to the MP, but I want to help you, you can go in our website and there is a donation page where you can donate either cash or you can donate clothes, or you can donate your time doing volunteer work. And that's something that always we are welcome. We are a small organization, a grassroots organization that if you see, we receive funding from governments, but it's a very little. Most of the we are looking is to have, we receive funding from foundations. And we are lucky that our program on anti-human trafficking is funded by the Minister of Children and Social Services in the province of Ontario as a part of their strategy to combat human trafficking. But it's also always is a need. That's why I was thinking coming here that the need is high and is big, and is that we need that not just to support and call the police, is to welcome them and make them feel comfortable that they can come and open up what is their situation when you go and talk to them.
With, just 1 minute, could you quickly reflect or share, what else would you like to add? Is there something important that you feel like the general public should know about this topic?
I think, and I want to reinforce that two things. One is to welcome them. The second is that any migrant worker that you see, they are coming and they are giving a contribution to our country and to keep this country beautiful, and that they are human beings and that they deserve being treated with justice. I mean justice, that they can have a better work conditions, but also that they can be, if they want to stay in Canada, they can stay in Canada.
Well, Loly, it has been such an honor to speak with you today. Thank you so much for joining this conversation and for the incredibly impactful and valuable work and your tireless efforts and dedication over the last 32 years to support precarious migrant workers in our community. If you're tuning into the show today and you are in need of immediate support and you are in danger and it's safe to do so, please call 911. If you are looking for information and support related to human trafficking in Canada in general, you can call the Human Trafficking Hotline at 1-833-900-1010. Again, that's 1-833-900-1010. Thank you so much for joining this conversation today, and we hope to catch you next time on Freedom Fighters Code Gray.